Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. So it's a composite image. It looks like a screen capture. Mm-hmm. At the top it says Fantasy Bundle 2 in white lettering.
Right.
And underneath it there are 3 book covers. One is called Mistress of the Rock. One is that pronounced Skyla the Revenge?
That's correct, yeah. That's exactly right.
And then there's Julie's Odyssey, Alpha and Omega.
Yeah, that's correct. It's part of a trilogy of books that I wrote based on an epiphany moment that I had a long time ago at the Rocks in Petra, which is the birthplace of the Aphrodite legend. Yeah, the legend basically is that the name Afro means from the foam, and it actually is supposedly the link, if you like, between the Greek gods and civilization. Put it a better way. The story that I actually started the whole thing off was I was over here with my wife before we got married. We came over to meet the family, and we decided we'd go to Petra for a lunch. We went there and we talked about what does Aphrodite mean, and why is it called Aphrodite's Rock? And I basically stand there sort of very dubious about the whole thing. It's a legend. It's what it is. And what happened was I saw something on the wall, and it was really quite strange because I've never yet been able to find it. But the thing that I saw on the wall was a poster from the Cyprus Tourist Board, and the Cyprus Tourist Board had an aerial shot of the rock. And when you look at the aerial shot of the rock, you actually can see a figure in the water. So it looks like a female figure in the water. That is, if you like, kicks the whole story off of how Mistress of the Rock came about. But if you go on the website, you'll be able to see similar to what I saw. It's not the exact same image, but it's similar to what I saw, and therefore that was the catalyst for the whole story, or the journey, if you like, of the trilogy.
So maybe context, set the scene a little bit. How many years ago was this?
I first wrote the book when I first came, when it first started. I wrote it simply as a Christmas present for my wife for her to open on Christmas morning. That was it. So it was it's a love story. Aphrodite is a love story. So I wrote it just purely as a one-off, got it printed. She showed it to a couple of people, and they said, well, why don't you try and get it published? There was a publisher in Nicosia who I sent a synopsis to, and he said, have you got the full manuscript? So I said, yes. So he said, well, come and see me this was on the Thursday, he said, come and see me on the Monday. And by the Tuesday, we'd signed contracts and we were printing the book. That's wow. How it came about.
So, yeah, how did you fall into writing? I mean, first of all, I think it's glorious, it's romantic, it's beautiful that you're just like, well, I'm going to write you a book that is just for you as a gift.
Yes.
And so how did you land in writing? Are you a writer by trade? Where would this come from?
Going back into the early 70s, I was a drummer in a band, and a mate of mine who used to work for Hammer Films, he said to me, we've got a friend who works in a hospital radio, and he wants some scripts. And I said, well, I've never written anything in my life. What do you mean he wants some scripts? He said, well, look, we'll get together, we'll write some ideas down and see if the scripts will actually work out. So we actually wrote the scripts for the hospital radio. And not only did we write them for the hospital radio, but we performed on them as well. So it was played for the patients, basically. That's what it was.
Okay.
We had all this material that we had, And Phil Campbell, the guy who I was working with, he said, well, look, I might as well send this off somewhere. So he sent it to the BBC. And first of all, we sent it to Dave Allen, and Dave Allen looked at the stuff, but he'd just finished the series. So there was an issue that maybe he could use some of the material for the next series of Dave Allen shows that came up.
Mm-hmm.
But he also sent it to the Two Ronnies. Now, the Two Ronnies at the time were the biggest comic duo on the circuit, and they had audiences of 30 million, each weekend. Unbelievable.
Wow.
And we were lucky enough to get a joke on. But not only did we get a joke on, we got a joke on the Christmas show as well, which is usually the most watched one. And from there, that kind of catapulted us into the idea of writing gags for various shows. We wrote for radio. We wrote for Roy Hudd on Huddlines. We wrote for Weekendings, which was a satirical show. And we wrote for various other shows. But the problem was that I was married, he was married, and it was a case of, this isn't going to pay for the mortgage. So
right.
What we had to do was to try and, gauge what was the best thing. So we tried to do it freelance for a while, and then it petered out. And and kept doing some one-offs and things like that for the various shows. I did a thing with Tracy Ullman in BBC Scotland, which was called A Kick Up the 80s. So that's how I got into writing, if you like.
Wow, it's a long established path, I guess, or history of writing. So okay, but then why would you settle on fantasy? Because that's a very specific kind of form or a specific kind of aesthetic. And so is it because you like fantasy, or did this kind of just make sense in terms of where you were living? Like,
I can't say that I'm a lover of fantasy. I've read Lord of the Rings and things when I was younger, some of those type of stories. But no, the essence of the story of Mistress of the Rock is purely based on the supposition that there's more to the rock than people see, and that's what the idea is. So from there, it was a way of being able to develop the character and then develop the plot, because I had the foundations of the story.
Right.
The story being that this is something that is what I described as fact, fantasy, and fiction. So those three together make up the genre, if you like, which is like the new genre. It's a fact because there's a piece of rock that's in the water at Patrick Romeo. It's a fantasy because of the legend that echoes around the actual legend of Aphrodite, and it's fiction because the characters in it are fictional as well. That presents itself as being a unique opportunity. Yeah.
Right. So this image that you sent over says Fantasy Bundle 2. Now, is that a sales thing, or is there what's Fantasy Bundle 1?
Fantasy Bundle 2 is basically, because of my publisher, who's at Rock Hill Publishing in the States. I have this issue, unfortunately, that my publisher is in the States. The chances of me getting books over from the States to Cyprus are negligible because the price of postage is absolutely phenomenal. So therefore I have to rely on marketing from the States for them to be able to sell the books, even though the books are in places like the bookstores in the UK as well, and bookstores generally worldwide. But they're not in sufficient number for me to be recognised. I think that's the best way that I can describe it. If you're in the big five, for example, you don't have that issue because your marketing and everything else is all done for you, and your books are on the shelves. If you're
Right.
self-publisher, or you're a publisher who is like me with James. James publishes books, but he does it on a print-on-demand basis, which means that if somebody asks for the books, he'll print it, but he won't print 60 or 70 copies at a time, which is limitation, as you can imagine.
Okay, Myron, you're the first person, let alone author, from Cyprus. So let's go on to the next photo.
Yeah, sure.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?